This is Saturn Girl. Like this video and subscribe to my channel. Comment below because I want to know what you think and it helps me out with the algorithm. Also, when you subscribe, click that bell and press all so you get notified when my new videos drop. And they're the best. Well, anyway, guess what, you vultures? It's time for your horoscopes for Mars entering Scorpio. Remember last video I talked about Mars entering Scorpio on October 11th. And he will remain there until November the 24th. So I mentioned a lot about what this transit means in general. But what's it mean for you? Well, hopefully Mercury in Libra helps a little bit with our thought process, but you will likely be a bit more aggressive and one-pointed, focused on what you want, or what I want. I mean, I'm focused on what I want, and you're focused on what you want, because that's Mars in Scorpio. Well, Mars, right, is sort of like a wolf stalking her prey, eyeballing you from the bushes, right? The tendency towards conflicts and arguments will be unusually high. We won't be as patient with disagreements as we typically are. Or maybe you're never patient, I don't know. But for those of us with any Libra, we'll be acting very uncharacteristically. So anyway, if we think someone is trying to stand in our way or impede our desires, we will likely react not so nicely. Well, anyway, a tendency towards grudges and revenge is exceptionally high as well. Ask yourself if retaliation is really worth it. I'm saying that for me because I usually want to retaliate at the drop of a hat. So, you know, Mars things. I have Mars combust. Well, anyway, holding on to a grudge or offense binds you to a debt, doesn't it? It's like owing or being owed retribution. So reconciliation may be a more advantageous way of dealing with things than retribution or revenge, right? I mean forgiveness by reconciliation, including forgiving yourself, right? But also atoning for things. And by atone, what do we mean? We mean that you make things right, whether it means that you have to be punished or suffer or make things right or make a payment or restitution. It means balancing that debt. Forgiveness is about squaring, right? Squaring is to make things right. Squaring an emotional debt. Anyway, well, what else? Passions will be high. You may notice a new invigoration and drive in the area of life indicated by the house, which Mars is entering for you. Whichever house, whole sign house, Scorpio is for you. Believe me, this is much more applicable and workable in whole sign houses. You know, when you have like planets vying for rulership of a house because a house cusp just happens to fall in the middle of a sign. Or maybe the house swallows up several signs. Again, I can't stand that nonsense, but you could check out my video about houses for all that stuff. So, well, of course, the house that Mars rules will also be quite important. And for that, we need to do your horoscopes, right? And we do these for each of the rising signs. If you don't know your rising sign, you can find out your birth time and go to a reputable website or app and enter all that in, and it should tell you your rising sign. If you don't know your birth time, then you can watch this for your sun sign. So the house that Mars enters in your chart will indicate who or what the conflict is centered around or involves in some way. The other house, the house that Mars enters in your chart will indicate who or what the conflict is centered around. But the other house, whichever one Aries is for you, will indicate what it likely involves. So let's get into this, shall we? Let me have some salt water because I have pot. And I have to drink lots and lots of salt water. I'm like a fish or a mermaid. I like mermaid better. I mean, they're not real, aren't they? So anyway, let's start with Aries Rising. Well, that means Mars enters your 8th house of death and debt, and also rules your 1st house of self. So you may have experienced conflicts in your relationships before, which now are moving to your finances. And this could indicate money issues in your relationships. If you have shared income with a partner, there will likely be arguments over this, over spending, over money, right? And that's pretty typical in romantic relationships, isn't it? Especially these days, when people can't even break up because they can't afford to. Well, you may have to deal with sudden losses, like something breaks, or you have to use credit to fix or replace it. I think in terms of bigger items like cars, appliances, but since Mars rules your 1st house, be careful about making silly mistakes from rushing and being impulsive. Those could cost you money. You want to be careful. It also could be that you need to spend money to make money, like perhaps with self-promotion or buying supplies and equipment, the S&E. Well, let's move ahead. Let's move ahead to our Taurus Rising homies. One for me and one for my homies. Right? Taurus Rising, Mars enters your 7th house of partnerships and also rules your 12th house of mental health and isolation. You may have had to struggle with health concerns, or you've had a surge or rush of energy to do all the things that you've been avoiding, haven't you? Now you may experience arguments or even splits in your relationships, particularly the romantic ones. But alternatively, there could be a legal battle that you have to deal with. It could even be with an ex or your partner. Whatever happens, though, it could cause you a lot of anxiety or make you want to be alone to figure this stuff out because it's the 12th house, right? Let's move on to our Gemini Rising friends. This is Lifestyles of the Gemini Rising. I thought of Robin Leach for some reason. You probably don't even know who Robin Leach is. He did Lifestyles of the Rich and Famous. Lifestyles of the Gemini Rising. So, well, for Gemini Rising friends, Mars enters your 6th house of obligations and illnesses, but also rules your 11th house of hopes and friends. So you may have had to struggle with your kids before, right? This may be the tail end of it. It may have been their behavior, if you have kids, of course. It could have also made you quite randy and insatiable, though, when it comes to your, romantic life. It drives our libido high and can make us a bit reckless. We want to have fun. But see, now it's time to get down to business. Taking care of business and working overtime. Working overtime. I did plenty of that. Anyway. So you will probably get some motivation to start knocking items off the list. I bet you've been putting things off like a true Gemini. We're so good at procrastinating. You'll likely feel overwhelmed, and you may find that friends and supporters can really alleviate that stress that's, holding on to you. Blah! You know. And Gemini Rising does not need extra stress. We create stress when there isn't even any. So, well, let's move forward to, come on, to our Cancer Rising friends. I love Cancer Rising. I do. My bestie has Cancer Rising. My bestie Anne. Hopefully she watches these videos. She better be, or else I'm going to be pissed. So anyway, Cancer Rising for our friend Anne. Mars enters your 5th house of children and pleasure, and also rules your 10th house of life direction. So, if your parents are still alive, you may have had some tension with them. Or because it's the 4th house, it could also be landlords or mortgage companies or property management. But now you're going to feel the tension probably with your children. If you have them, they may act out or fight you on everything. You know, like, no, 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 no. When they learn that word no, life changes, doesn't it? You know, I mean, we need to encourage them to make their own decisions and to have their own boundaries, of course. But you will be driven a little crazy, probably. So, whether or not you have kids, the tendency towards pleasure and fun will be high. You may want to cut loose and enjoy yourself. Your libido may be unusually strong. Since Mars rules your 10th house, though, this could indicate needing to adjust your work life to accommodate your children or your private life, to have fun. If you can't have fun, what's the point, right? Like, remember The Shining, all work and no play makes Jackie a dull girl, right? Here's Johnny. Anyway, sorry. I love that movie, though. Red rum, red rum, red rum. Danny isn't here, Mrs. Torrance. Sorry. I mean, my silly references are part of what makes this kind of fun. Anyway. So, like I said, you'll probably need to address your work-life balance. But let's move on to our Leo Rising friends. Leo Rising. I've had so many Leo Rising ex-partners. It's redonkulous. It's like I'm making a directory of Leo Risings. You know, just going through every single one bit by bit. Well, this means Mars enters your 4th house, doesn't it? Down here. Down here. Your 4th house of home and parents, and also rules your 9th house, Aries, of your beliefs and the law and long-distance travel. So you may have noticed fights with your siblings before, or you may have had to struggle with road rage or a car accident, or even fights with neighbors. But now the struggle goes into your home and living situation. So you could see rent go up, or a landlord may start some shizzle with you. There could be a conflict with your lease, right? There's all sorts of things. People could accuse you of stuff, of prohibited behavior, because there's all sorts of things in that lease. And when a neighbor gets upset, you know, like I accidentally filmed naughty content one time and my windows were open. This was a long time ago. It was very embarrassing, so make sure to close your windows, you know? So, I'm not saying that's prohibited behavior necessarily, but you don't want to piss off your neighbors. Since your 9th house is involved, it could be moving, perhaps far away. Remember long distance travel. Or this dispute, right, because the law is involved. This dispute with someone could involve legal obligations or rules that you or they agreed to, right? So do your best to follow the rules, keep your nose clean, and stay organized. Because when people call you out on things, you do want to have, you want to have your information and your evidence that they are wrong. Correct? So anyway, well, let's go to our Virgo Rising friends. Virgo Rising. Got the Virgo Rising. Rising, rising. Mojo Rising. Gotta keep on rising. Anyway, So Virgo rising, Mars enters your third house of siblings and local area, and also rules your eighth house of death and debt. So I bet you spent more money than you intended, didn't you? Now you will likely see conflicts with your siblings or people in your local community, right? Mars in your third house often correlates with road rage, sometimes accidents, right? During your commutes or errands, of course, because those are around your local area. You can also see conflicts with neighbors or people in your area. Maybe you get involved in organizing a local event, and you are at odds with the other people involved. Like, don't put that there. That's so ugly. Who would ever put a jack-o'-lantern next to a skeleton? Or why would you ever have, a gourd? I don't know. It's the attack of the gourds, the killer gourds. Remember the killer tomatoes? What if they were killer gourds? That would be scary, wouldn't it? Well, anyway, now I've gotten off track, but you see what I'm saying. It could also be that a sibling or friend owes you money, or the other way around. One or both of you could disagree about the details of the payment or the amount or when it's due. So, but let's move on to our Libra Rising homies. So Libra Rising, gotta keep on rising. Mars enters your second house of money and also rules your seventh house of partnerships. You likely have been impulsive and arrogant for a while, haven't you? Because Mars was in your first house. Well, in your Libra rising, so, not saying anything. But you possibly rushed through things and either caused problems for yourself or a partner. But now you will likely get excited about money, right? In fact, Mars in the second house often burns a hole in our pockets, doesn't it? We usually spend too much or get too optimistic about our financial situation. It could be that you spend money on your relationship. There's all sorts of ways to do that, like buying an engagement ring or a promise ring, or, one of those people that buys your spouse a big ticket present, like a car. I'm not saying that you're necessarily going to do any of that, but it's quite likely that you do. It could be just little stuff. Excuse me. You pay for a big expensive dinner or something. I don't know. You spend $100 on dinner. It doesn't have to be anything extravagant, though. It's the value that you feel in it more, right? So anyway, well, let's move on from Libra rising to the lady of the hour. And I'm calling Scorpio a lady because it's a water sign. And remember, they being ancient astrologers, considered the water and earth signs to be feminine and the air and fire signs to be masculine. But we can just as easily say yin for feminine and yang for masculine, can't we? It's about polarity. So for our Scorpio rising homies, Mars enters your first house of self and also rules your sixth house of obligations and illnesses. So you'll likely want to be left alone. Or you likely wanted to be left alone, right? Because Mars was in your 12th house. And now it will probably feel like you're bursting out of your cage, right? Like, remember gorillas? Finally, someone let me out of my cage. Doopy doopy doo, dappa dappa rhymes with cage. I don't know the lyrics. I just remember that first part. That song came out when I was in high school. Right? Or you could be like the Kool-Aid guy. Remember when he burst through the wall and says, "Oh yeah," right? But it feels like you're coming out of this cocoon that you isolated yourself in for a while, right? So, you'll likely have a lot of energy now, and maybe even some agitation. You'll probably be extra confident and probably combative too. But it's still a pleasant change, right? from the anxiety you previously had. Because Mars in the 12th house can bring us some anxiety. Now, since Mars rules your 6th house, you could be occupied by obligations and things that you need to take care of, or addressing health issues that you've been neglecting. I know there's a few that I've been neglecting. Part of it is the whole wacky insurance thing. And that's the other thing about the 6th house and the 8th house is insurance. But let's move on to our Sagimattarius friends. Sagimattarius. Sagimattarius. So Mars enters your 12th house, doesn't he? Of mental health and isolation, but also rules your 5th house of children and pleasure. Pleasure. Women pay me to give them pleasure. That was from, I hate that movie though. Deuce Bigelow and Rob Schneider. I mean, like all those Happy Madison movies, they ruined all these guys' careers because they're just ridiculous. The only one I really liked was Grandma's Boy. That was funny. Grandma's Boy. Because the grandma says, look, I made you ice cream sandwiches on whole wheat with lettuce. I love that part. Anyway. So you probably were having conflicts with friends, supporters, or perhaps even your own aspirations. Now you're probably going to want to be alone. And people who intrude in your space will get your wrath. That Mars and Scorpio wrath. Yes. Yes. That's my Blix voice, my goblin voice. I do that sometimes. Well, excuse me. Oftentimes we have mental health issues with this transit. We need to puzzle out, and frequently by ourselves, right? Puzzle out things that we're processing or going through. And you may have a strong desire for seclusion, like Henry David Thoreau. Alternatively, though, this could involve your children because it's the 5th house. So that could be addressing a child's mental health or perhaps even learning disabilities. But let's move on to Capricorn Rising. Our Cappy Rising friends. I love Capricorn Rising. You know, I've had several Capricorn Rising exes. I have a sister who's a Cap Rising. My daughter's a Cap. You know. So for Cap Rising, Mars enters your 11th house of hopes and friends, and also rules your 4th house of home and parents. So, did you have fights with bosses or co-workers over the past month or two? Maybe you got a bad reputation. Sometimes we get recognized for the things we do wrong. But now, agitation with your friends or supporters could replace that. So, just warning you. It may just be that you feel like you need to cut people off. Or that what you aspired to before just seems stupid now. It could be a bit depressing and alienating, but you have to see that other opportunities could emerge from the conflicts, right? We learn a certain degree of self-reliance, but it's very important that we don't drive away our very important supporters. I struggle with some mental health issues, and even with very, very close friends and family. A little thing can trigger me so much that all of a sudden, you know, I want to cut someone off. But we have to remember that it is really a disservice to ourselves to alienate our biggest supporters. And it's okay when people disagree with us. We don't agree with everyone else, do we? So, anyway, I just mentioned that because it's important to remember when Mars is in the 11th house. But on a positive note, you could get some encouragement and support from your family, right? Because the 4th house is included. They could feel like your friends or your fans or your patrons, right? Well, anyway, let's move on to Aquarius Rising. This is me, and this is my Aquarian homies. So for us, Mars enters our 10th house, right, of life direction, and also rules our 3rd house of siblings in the local area. So we were probably, or probably are right now, a bit fanatic and aggressive about what we believe and, what we know, our ideas, our ideology, right? So I know I was. Now we're susceptible to conflicts with authority. I mean, I always am, right? But it would be even more pronounced this time. And conflicts with your life direction. Last time Mars was in my 10th house, I started producing naughty content, so it just goes to show you there's different ways this can express. You could be fighting with a boss or co-workers. Sometimes this even correlates with quitting a job, right? Or cutting it off, right? Just Mars cuts stuff off, right? That's what Mars does. But since Mars also rules our 3rd house, it could also be that we get recognition for writing or speaking. In my case, it revolves around content creation. But also, siblings, my little brother is helping me with some of my content. So, my astrology content with editing and stuff like that. I mean, we're just starting to do this. So, that's the 3rd house, right? Anyway. But let's move on to our Pisces Rising friends. So, for our Pisces Rising friends, this means Mars enters your 9th house of beliefs and higher learning. It also rules your 2nd house of money. So were you having a bit of money issues before? Unforeseen expenses or losses? Well, now you'll likely become a bit of a zealot. I bet you'll be thumping your favorite spiritual book, trying to convert people to your way of thinking. You'll feel very correct, like I've been feeling, right? And we have to know that ultimately we're never right. And the best we can ever do is approximate truth and reality. But if we're involved in a spiritual path, it is our duty and responsibility to be pursuing or investigating reality, existence, the sense of self. Anyway, so now I'm preaching. But with this transit, we usually get very passionate. But we also have a propensity to get caught up in debates and arguments, sometimes needlessly so, creating conflicts that are just creating more trouble later. If we had thought about if we had thought before we spoke, we may have avoided the whole thing. What is the value of the debate? I'm saying this for myself, because I don't lose debates, I lose friends. We have to be careful. We don't just cut people off, though, right? Just because they disagree with us. And I've done this a couple of times, especially with people who've always been my supporter. And it's shooting yourself in the foot, right? So be careful about that. So it's okay for people to disagree with you, as long as it's not about your right to exist. I don't compromise on that. You could also have a desire to make a donation to a spiritual organization. Or, excuse me, or you could just be really defensive about your attitude towards money. You know, whether it's being liberal or miserly. Like, someone might say to you, like, you don't always have to foot the bill. Well, this is the right thing to do. Or someone could say, you could contribute every once in a while. No, I never eat anything. When that person goes out with you and you're like, I just want to pick at your plate a little bit. Well, do you want to contribute money? No. Anyway, now I'm getting into little stuff. But I hope this was useful. Remember to like and subscribe and click the bell so you get notified when my new videos drop. And watch my videos, my old ones too. There's lots of good information. They're very fun and educational. And I'm sometimes a bit cute and funny. right? Oh, and I do spectacular readings. They're the best. It's science, right? All my contact information is below. My website is frankielynch.com. And once again, I love you. You're beautiful. And have a wonderful, whatever it is you're having.